Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. This is a quote I came across recently. It was a data scientist who said that, so it does make sense. However, I thought this was a brilliant quote, and I'm going to try to stick to that as much as I can over the course of this presentation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Denny Sabah. I work for Clarksons. Clarksons Plateau is a shipbroker. We're the largest shipbroker in the world. We have 45 offices in 25 countries. We're listed on the London Stock Exchange with a market cap of £800 million. We have 750 brokers working for us across the world. Besides that, we also have a department that deals with the hedging of freight to minimize the risk for our clients. We have a department that deals with the hedging of fuel oil and bunkers. We have Clarksons Research, which is the largest maritime research unit in the world, with 120 analysts, which covers data on absolutely everything related to the maritime world. We have an investment banking arm based in New York and in Norway with 150 bankers. They do all standard investment banking activities. They help our clients access the capital markets. They raise debt, they raise equity, they lead on IPOs, they advise on M&A. And there's a project finance department, one team of which raises finance purely for the development and expansion of mines, greenfield and brownfield. Today, I'm going to be looking at the freight market. First, I'm going to start looking at freight rates, where they are, how we got here. Then I'm going to look at the fundamentals, the demand-supply balance of the shipping world. And lastly, I'm going to take that information and try to show how you guys, as steel producers, as scrap merchants, can actually benefit from that, how you can take control of that and try to make money from it. So, freight rates. The Baltic Dry Index, the BDI, is the standard index of dry cargo freight rates. This is reported every day in almost every business magazine and newspaper in the world. It is actually made up of 4 sub-indices, which is very important to know. You have one for each of the 4 ship types. The Baltic Handysize Index, the smallest ones, the Baltic Supramax Index, the Baltic Panamax Index, and the Baltic Capesize Index. The BDI, the Baltic Dry Index, is an amalgamation of those 4. Now, it's been going for about 30 years. It was established in the mid-1980s. It hovered between 1 and 2,000 for about 20 years. It's an index, remember. Then China burst onto the scene. Then we had the boom. Then we had the bust. And freight has been suffering ever since. In fact, 2016, while that was a low for most commodity markets, in the freight world, that was the lowest point ever. Freight rates have recovered remarkably since then over the past 2 to 3 years, 200, 300, 350% in some cases. However, freight rates historically are still very low. Now, the BDI, as I said, widely reported, is often seen as a bellwether of global trade. People think that the higher the BDI is, the more trade there is. The lower it is, the less trade it is. So it's a sort of indicator of how well the global economy is doing. I put it to you that this is an incorrect way of looking at it. Freight rates are a function of the demand and supply of ships. That's it. You can have increased trade, but if you have an even bigger increase in the number of ships, freight rates drop. The BDI is not an indicator of how well the global economy is doing. Moreover, because it is made up of 4 subsectors, if you only use in your business smaller vessels, handy-sized vessels, the BDI, which is largely swayed by the larger vessels, the BDI is not indicative of the freight that you consume if you only use small vessels. Freight is probably the most volatile commodity that I know. Now, here we have a chart of the 3 smaller vessels, Handysize, Supramax, Panamax, over the past 10 years. On the whole, they move roughly in tandem with each other. If you were to zoom in more closely, you would see real changes week to week, month to month, huge volatility. However, let's look at Capesize rates as well. Hugely volatile, massively volatile. And it is that which moves the Baltic Dry Index. In theory, Handysize rates can be flat, but if Capesize rates shoot up, the Baltic Dry Index shoots up. So if you only use small vessels for your business, the BDI is not indicative of the freight that you consume. Now, when I say it's volatile, how volatile are we talking? This chart shows the month-on-month percentage change in the BDI, the Baltic Dry Index, and the Baltic Handysize Index. Now, this is an absolute change. So whether it goes up 5% or down 5%, it's still a 5% change. It's going back almost 20 years. There's two main things that you can see. First of all, at the beginning of the decade, the red line and the blue line are almost the same. In fact, at the beginning of the decade, the two are correlated by 92%. Since the crash, they've been correlated by 38%. The second thing to see, over the past 10 years, the blue line is significantly above the red line every single month. The blue line, the BDI, moves over the past 5 years, has moved on average 18% every month. The red line has moved 12% every month. 18 is 50% more than 12. The BDI is 50% more volatile than handy-size freight rates. So again, if you only use small vessels, the BDI is not indicative of the freight that you consume. Now, I've just said that the BDI is seen as a bellwether of global trade, almost an economic indicator. Let's consider some of the other economic indicators. If you were to look at the price of oil, the price of gold, the dollar, the euro, S&P 500, FTSE 100, imagine if any of those moved at 18% a month, every single month. There'd be chaos in the financial markets. But in freight, this is just what we have to deal with. So how do we deal with it? We hedge. We have the FFAs, the Freight Forward Agreement. This is the freight world's derivatives market. It is a wide, deep, and very liquid market. You can hedge your freight up to 7 years in advance. Here I have a forward curve going forward 3 months, 3 quarters, and 3 years. And here again, there's a couple of main points to take. First of all, the forward curve is relatively flat. Now, it's actually expected to go up over the next 3 to 6 months. This is because, as you can see, there's been quite a drop in freight rates over the past couple of months, which I can get into later. And we expect rates to go back to where they were a couple of months ago. But besides that, the forward curve is relatively flat. Now, I've just said that freight is the most volatile commodity out there. So that doesn't seem entirely plausible. But forward curves often are flat, so let's forget about that for a moment. More importantly, it's going down. It's trending downwards, 2020, 21, 22. It's trending down, it's trending down very slowly. The fundamentals of the market do not agree with this. So what do the fundamentals say? Demand and supply. Demand is the amount of commodity being traded around the world. Supply is the number of ships in the world. What is demand? How much commodity is traded around the world? 5 billion tons. Last year it was 5.2 billion tons. Now, if you look here, you can see this is a trade over the past 20 years. You can see it's gone up almost every single year this century, with the exception of 2009, of course, and 2015, when it grew at 0%. Now, that 0% growth in 2015 was completely unexpected. It took the market by shock, and that is one of the reasons that freight rates didn't just fall in 2015-16, like all other commodities, but ensured that they absolutely collapsed and crashed. It was that unexpected 0% growth. However, it's continued to grow. Trade has continued to grow since then. Supply. How many ships are there in the world? 11,000. This has grown every year this century, including in 2009, including in 2015. There's been a relentless churning out of vessels every single year, especially towards the end of the last decade. What you can notice, though, is that growth has slowed dramatically in the past couple of years. Still growth, but it's slowed dramatically, and that's incredibly important for balancing balancing the demand-supply and bringing freight rates back towards more normal levels. Let's plot demand and supply against each other to compare the two. Supply is the fleet, demand, commodity trade. Let's read what it says on the right-hand side of the chart. Since 2005, trade has grown by 66%, but the fleet has grown by 86%. Too many ships. The fleet has grown at a faster rate than trade in 7 of the last 10 years. This has led to an oversupply of vessels and to depressed freight rates. But things are changing. We can see here how many vessels are ordered at shipyards each and every year. These are recorded, they're logged. We have a very good record of this. And this is quite an interesting chart. First of all, before China burst onto the scene, on average, 200 to 400 ships were ordered each year around the world. Then we got into the boom and things got crazy. In 2007, 2,000 ships were ordered. That's one ship every 4 hours. Now, we all remember 2007, and we all remember how good it was, but did the world need one ship every 4 hours? That is the second reason that led to the crash of the dry bulk market in the years to come. 2016, the bottom, what do we see? Almost nothing. People ordered almost no ships whatsoever in 2016. But because we see how many ships are ordered in 2018, 2019, we know how much the fleet is going to grow by. We know what the fleet will be in 2019, 20, 21, because we see how many ships are being ordered. So, what's going to happen in the future? What do we see happening? We know that the fleet is increasing in size, as we've seen. Commodity trade, we know that that's going to increase too. Now, dry bulk commodities can be grouped into two sort of baskets, two groups: metals and minerals, and agricultural goods. One is led on the whole by the growth in the global economy. The other is led on the whole by the growth in the human population. And if you think of if you look at all of the commodities that are out there, all the dry bulk commodities, iron ore, coal, steel, scrap, bauxite, alumina, copper, nickel, zinc, chrome, manganese, pig iron, DRI, HBI, gypsum, ilmenite, rutile, barite, fluorspar, fertilizers, gypsum, petcoke, metcoke, grains, corn, wheat, barley, soybeans, soy meal, salt, rice, sugar. All of these products are dry bulk goods. Almost all of these products are going to be consumed in greater volumes in the next 2 to 3 years, which means all these products are going to be traded in greater volumes over the next 2 to 3 years, which means demand for ships is going to go up. And it's going to go up at a faster rate than ships can be built. Demand is going to be greater than supply. And when demand is greater than supply, what happens? Prices go up. So what are you going to do about it? You are steel producers, you're scrap merchants, you are consumers of freight. Freight is a cost of yours. It's a cost over which you have no control. But that cost is going to go up. So what do? How do you insulate your businesses against this rising cost? You take control of that cost. You bring it in-house. Knowledge is power. Sentia potentia est, knowledge is power. Thomas Hobbes was a great English philosopher of the 1600s. His greatest piece of work, Leviathan, was a treatise on the state and society and the duties and responsibilities that the two had towards each other. It's in this book that we first come across the phrase, knowledge is power, sentia potentia est. I said that there are 11,000 ships in the world. Here you have 11,000 green dots. You can click on each one of these dots. You can see the name of the ship, the owner of the ship, who's operating the ship, how old is the ship, how big is the ship, how deep is the ship, where is the ship coming from, where is the ship going to? Does the ship have a cargo on it? Is the ship empty? You can look at a port. You can track ships coming in and out of their port in real time. The 11,000 green dots, they move in real time. You can track different ports. You can see exactly what's happening in those ports. Let's zoom in some more. I've chosen Chittagong Port in Bangladesh to look at. It's one of the largest and fastest growing ports in that region of the world. It's also, interestingly, a demolition beach. A demolition beach is a beach that ships, once they've served their purpose for 25, 30, 35 years, when you can no longer use that ship, you sail the ship onto a beach, and that's where ships go to die before going up to ship heaven. That's a demolition beach. Chittagong Beach is probably the largest in the world. Let's zoom in some more. Here you can see ships just sitting on the beach. They've been sailed up there and left. Miles and miles of ships just sitting on a beach waiting to be demolished and sold for scrap. Let's zoom in some more. Here you can see the carcasses of the ships in various degrees of having been demolished. That looks like a small oil spill in the middle. These are the men who demolished the beaches. It's a dirty, unsafe, uncomfortable job to do. Demolition beaches have made huge strides in recent years to make them safer and more sturdy for their staff. But it's still an unpleasant job, certainly a job I wouldn't want to do, but it's hugely important to the shipping industry and helps balance the market. It's vital. Let's zoom in some more. Here you see, highlighted in green, a number of ships berthed at Chittagong Port. It's a river port. Let's pick one, the one in red. This ship is called the Freedom Line. You have on the right-hand side all the information related to the ship. Now, you may not actually be that fussed about how old the ship is, or which shipyard built it, but you may want to know where it came from, or where it's going, or how much it's carrying. So before coming to Chittagong, this ship was at Sri Lanka. Before that, it was in India. Before that, it was South Africa. Now, why does that matter? Why is that important? You will all look at trade data, and you will look at it once a month, and there'll be a 2 or 3 month delay. You can see trade data in real time, cargo by cargo, ship by ship, day by day. Now, I said before that freight is a cost of yours and one that you need to take control of, and that knowledge is power. How does that all tie together? Why does that bring me to this? You all know your businesses. You know what you produce, you know who you sell to, you know how much you sell, you know when your next shipment is, you know how much they're buying. What are your rivals doing? How much are they selling? Where are they selling to? You can watch them. You know your port. You know your rival's port. Observe your rival's port. You can see ship by ship what they're loading. Track that ship. Where's the ship selling to? Because that's their customer. That should be your customer. Watch your customer's port. You can see your ship arriving at their port, but they don't only buy from you. They buy from your rivals as well. What other ships are arriving at the port? Watch those ships. Trace them back. Where did they come from? That's your rival. This helps you plan and strategize. It gives you an idea of your market share. It gives you an idea of what you're up against. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I speak to... yes, I'm back. How do you take control of this? How do you make money of this, out of this? There are many people, commodity producers, who will say, shipping's not for me. I produce my material as cheaply as I can, as best as I can. I try to sell at the highest price that I can. I give as good service as I can. Shipping isn't for me. It's not my business. But you can make this a new revenue stream. Your material is going to go on the sea and sail to a client anyway. Do it yourself. It's a new revenue stream. People involved in shipping, we don't do it for charity. We do it because we make money out of it. And I'm not suggesting you start growing pineapples as a new revenue stream. Your material, which is already going on a ship, do it yourself, make that a new revenue stream for yourself. Look at it from the point of view of the relationship between you and your customer. You, as the sales guy, as the marketing guy, you sell a cargo, you sell your product to your customer. Once it's sold, pass them on to one of your colleagues in the chartering department. They will deal with someone else in your customer's office in their logistics department. The two companies suddenly have to deal with each other more at multiple levels, in more departments. Your companies become more integrated with each other. You start doing more business together. You start working better together. It makes it harder for your customer to leave you. It improves the relationship between you and your customer, and who doesn't want a better relationship with their customer? Now, as I said, I speak to commodity producers of one sort or another every single day. And as I said, many of them say, freight's not for me. It's not what I do. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of meetings I've had in the past few months to demonstrate why I think that is wrong. I was speaking to a sugar producer, the largest sugar producer in Central America. He produces 2 million tons a year and has plants in 5 countries. He sells 100% of his product, FOB, to traders. He doesn't know who his customers are. I asked him who he sells to. He said about half my stuff, I think, goes to America. Most of the rest goes to Europe. I think some goes to Africa. But he didn't actually know. How do you plan? Maybe he lost a client because they weren't happy with the quality of his product. He doesn't even know. How does he work out what to do next year if you don't know who your customers are? Now, this is clearly an extreme case. I've never heard of that before. It's crazy, but it's a true story. And the guy sells 2 million tons a year. Second example, I was speaking to a cement producer, a large cement producer in North Africa. And he was selling a cargo to West Africa. And again, he said, shipping's not for me, I don't care. I asked him what the price of his cement was. He said $50 FOB. I said, do you know the price your customer is paying? He said $73 CFR. I said, what does that tell you? He said, freight is $23. $22, the trader's taking $1. I said, I can tell you freight is $18. The trader's taking $5. I said, how big is your cargo? He said, 20,000 tons. $100,000. I said, how regularly do you do this business? He said, once a month. $1.2 million. Now, it may not be your business, but for $1.2 million, make it your business. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm in no way criticizing traders. Traders are hugely important to the functioning of this industry. They take risks that others would never take on. They provide liquidity where there is none. They provide lifelines to new companies. They breathe life into dying companies. Traders are hugely important. This is not a criticism of them. What I'm saying is you can't ignore the freight element of your business. Because whether you like it or not, whether you agree or not, whether you believe it or not, if you produce a product which goes across the sea, then freight is a part of your business. And I can't think of another part of your business where you would say, I don't care about that. But I speak to people every day who say they don't care about the freight element of their business. And even if you decide at the end of the day not to get involved in freight, at the very least, know what's going on. Know what's happening with freight rates. Know what's happening in the freight markets. Because remember, sentia potentia est. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabah. Any questions for Mr. Sabah? That was an interesting topic. We have one question on the back side of the room.
Simone Jordan from Ronley. The BDI, why does it start at Handysize? A lot of cargoes are moved in smaller size ships than Handysize. So what about the likes of us that might need to hedge freight, but we only shipping in smaller vessels?
So the reason, in short, I don't know the exact answer, but the reason I assume is this. Even the different indices, the Handysize index, for example, is made up of a basket of 6, 8, 10 specific routes. So if it's Cape sizes, for example, there are some very clear routes. West Australia to China, Brazil to China, Colombia to Rotterdam. These are huge routes which are done every single day in Cape sizes. The smaller the ship becomes, the more routes are possible. A Cape size is never going to go from Mozambique to Brunei, ever. A Handysize may. So the smaller the ship, the more potential routes there are. So the Cape size index is made up of 5 routes. The Supramax is made up of 10. The Handysize, I think, is also 10 or 12. Anything smaller just becomes too difficult to track. Basically, you can't create an index. There's just too many of the ships, and there's too many endless routes that you can do.
Thank you. Any other questions? One more. Questions to you come from the rear side of the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering about the new regulation for bunker fuels from 2020 and what your expectations are on the freights for that.
So this is the IMO 2020 regulation, which comes into force in January 2020, related to the amount of sulfur that can be emitted when you burn fuel in a ship. This is probably the most significant change to hit the shipping industry in 50 years. It's huge. The effect on shipping will be huge. The effect on freight rates will be significant. Ship owners have 2 options. They can either burn new, more compliant fuel. So the regulation at the moment is you can only burn fuel with a maximum of 3.5% sulfur. It's going to change to 0.5% sulfur. So either, as of January, you can only consume the new type of fuel, the lower sulfur fuel, or you can install what's known as a scrubber into your vessel, and then you can burn the old fuel, and the scrubber cleans the emissions and pumps it into the water. And that's one of the differences. Today, emissions go into the air, the scrubber will pump it into the water. I'm not a scientist, but apparently that's more environmentally friendly to do so. The effect is that there's basically one effect. If you install a scrubber, the cost of a scrubber ranges from about $1 to $3 million. So a ship owner will pay $1 to $3 million, and then they need to recoup their money. How do they do that? They're going to start charging you more to use their ships. The second is don't use a scrubber, start using the new oil, but the new type of oil, the new type of fuel is more expensive. And either the ship owners can be really nice and just pay more themselves, or they're going to pass the cost on to you. So either way, whether the ship has a scrubber or uses the new type of fuel, they are going to start charging more, and significantly more. If we do a sort of back-of-the-envelope calculation, don't quote me on these numbers, as roughly, the main type of fuel today is roughly $350 a ton. Today, the new type of fuel is about $450, $480, so it's $100 more. A vessel of 20, 30,000 tons, a Handysize, will burn about 20 tons of fuel a day. 20 tons of fuel, $100 a ton more, that's $2,000 a day more.
That's huge.
The price of chartering a Handysize vessel today is $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and it's going to go up by $2,000. It's significant.
That's huge.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Thank you. Any other questions? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.